Never go to Maple Creek, Evelyn. Promise me. Those were the last real words my husband, Jonathan, ever said to me before the heart attack took him. Not "I love you," not "take care of yourself," just that one command, spoken with a fear that didn't belong to the man I'd known for 24 years. My name is Evelyn Hartwell, and if you've made it this far, I'm glad you're here. Give this story a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far truth can travel, because the one I'm about to tell you tore through my family like a wildfire that refused to die. At the time, I thought it was grief, speaking through exhaustion. But now, 2 weeks after burying him, as I sit in his attorney's mahogany-paneled office with trembling hands and red-rimmed eyes, I realize it was something else entirely. Mr. Winters, our lawyer for as long as I can remember, slides a small black box across the desk. Inside lies an antique brass key attached to a maple leaf charm and a sealed ivory envelope addressed in Jonathan's precise handwriting. For Evelyn. My name looks foreign, written by his hand. "What is this?" I whisper. "Your husband's final instruction," Winters replies gently. 3 years ago, he purchased a property in Alberta, Canada, Maple Creek Farm. He left it solely in your name, to be revealed only after his passing. I blink. Jonathan never owned land in Canada. He was born there, yes, but he hated that place. Winters hesitates, adjusting his glasses. Be that as it may, Mrs. Hartwell, the deed has been legally transferred. The property is fully paid off, all taxes settled for the next 5 years. My voice breaks into disbelief. He forbade me to go there. Why would he? He interrupts softly. Perhaps his letter will explain. The envelope trembles in my fingers. I break the seal. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, then I've already left you far sooner than I intended. I know I made you promise never to go to Maple Creek, but I'm releasing you from that promise now. In fact, I'm asking you to go. There's something waiting there that belongs to you alone. On the desk of the main house, you'll find a laptop. The password is "the day we met," followed by your maiden name. Watch the first video. You'll understand everything in time. All my love, always. Jonathan. The tears come hot and uncontrollable. Even from beyond the grave, Jonathan is still giving orders wrapped in affection. Still controlling the story. Still knowing I'd never resist unraveling a mystery he left behind. Mr. Winters clears his throat. There's one more thing, Mrs. Hartwell. I'm required to inform you that your husband's brothers have contested the will. They claim he wasn't of sound mind when he repurchased the family property. I look up sharply. That's absurd. Jonathan was rational until his last day. I don't doubt that. But there's been recent interest in the land. Significant oil deposits discovered nearby. The property's value has multiplied. The air leaves my lungs. Oil? Yes. And his brothers believe they have a claim. I close the box around the key, my decision forming in the silence between us. I'm going to Canada, I say finally, my voice steadier than it's felt in weeks. Winters frowns. I'd advise caution. I made him a promise once. I interrupt, standing. Now it's time I understand why. 2 days later, my rental car grinds to a stop in front of towering wrought iron gates marked with a single engraved name, Maple Creek. The countryside stretches before me in golds and reds, autumn swallowing Alberta whole. The air is cold, sharp, alive. And somewhere in this land, my husband's ghost is waiting for me to find it. I turn the brass key in the lock. The gates open without resistance. As I drive up the winding gravel road, the farmhouse comes into view, not abandoned or overgrown as I expected, but beautifully restored, 2 stories tall with white columns and a wide wraparound porch. Someone has been caring for it. My pulse quickens. I park, step out, and insert the key into the front door. The lock clicks, the door opens, and the world shifts. Inside, sunlight floods a grand room filled with paintings, horses everywhere, wild and free across fields of color and wind. Bronze sculptures, photographs, sketches, each detail so meticulous it steals my breath. Horses my obsession, not Jonathan's. My one passion he'd tolerated but never shared. And on a desk by the window, overlooking the rolling pasture, rests a silver laptop, closed. A single red rose laid across its lid. Before I can move, I hear the crunch of tires on gravel outside. Through the window, a black SUV pulls up beside my car. 3 men step out, their silhouettes sharp against the setting Sunday. One of them looks just like Jonathan, older, colder, alive. They're coming toward the porch with confident strides. The doorbell rings once, then a voice I don't recognize, deep and certain. "Mrs. Hartwell, we know you're inside. It's time we talked." I didn't answer the door. Not right away. The voice outside was polite, practiced, even, but there was something underneath it, a tone that reeked of ownership. That low, entitled confidence of men who had been told since birth that what they wanted was already theirs. I stayed still, my back against the wall beside the entryway, every nerve sharp. "Mrs. Hartwell," the voice called again. "It's Richard Hale, Jonathan's brother. We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to speak with you about family business." Family business. My hands curled into fists. Jonathan had barely spoken of his brothers, just shadows in his past, names mentioned only when exhaustion loosened his restraint. "Don't trust them, Evie," he'd said once, half asleep. "They take until there's nothing left." Another knock, harder this time. Through the window, I could see them now. 3 men, all carrying fragments of my husband's face. Richard, tall and silver-haired, exuding the effortless authority of someone accustomed to winning. Beside him, Charles, younger, sharper, a lawyer by the look of him. And a third man, quiet, expression unreadable. They looked like a family portrait painted in arrogance. When the knocking finally stopped, I waited. Counted the seconds. Watched through the lace curtain as they returned to their SUV. They were talking in low tones, glancing at the house. One of them made a phone call. I knew then, this wasn't a visit, it was reconnaissance. My gaze slid to the laptop on the desk. Jonathan's letter had told me to watch the first video. Maybe it held the answers I needed. Maybe it would tell me why these men were here, and why my husband had spent years building this place in secret. I crossed the room, my footsteps muffled on the old hardwood floors. The laptop opened with a soft chime. The password. The day we met, 05121996, followed by my maiden name, Evelyn Grace. The screen flickered to life, revealing a folder titled simply, "For Evelyn." My throat tightened. There were dozens of files inside, each one labeled with a date, starting from the day after his funeral. One video for every single day of the year ahead. My hand hovered over the first one. I clicked. Jonathan's face appeared. Not the pale, fading version I'd last seen in a hospital bed. This was him at his best. Vibrant, strong, the crooked smile that had melted me at 27 still entirely his own. "Hello, Evie." My knees weakened. I sat. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone," he said softly. "And you came here. I should have known you would. Curiosity always won with you." He chuckled, then grew serious. "There's a reason I made you promise never to come to Maple Creek. It wasn't superstition, it was protection. This land holds every secret I tried to bury, and some I never could." Outside, the SUV doors slammed. Voices rose. I turned the volume down, heart pounding. Jonathan's tone shifted, steady and calm. "You're probably not alone right now. My brothers Richard, Charles, maybe even David will come for the property. They've been waiting for this moment since the day I repurchased the land." I swallowed hard. 3 years ago, he continued, I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, the same heart disease that killed our father. The doctors gave me 2 to 5 years. I didn't tell you because I wanted to live those years with you, not die in front of you one day at a time. Tears blurred my vision. I used that time to rebuild Maple Creek. It was my penance and my gift to you. Everything I ever denied you, every dream we put off, every version of myself I couldn't be in that quiet suburban life, it's all here. He leaned forward, his voice lowering to a whisper. "But it's also a trap, Evie. My brothers believe they still own this land. They'll lie, manipulate, threaten anything to take it from you. Don't let them." A knock echoed through the house, startling me, louder, insistent. Jonathan's recorded voice overlapped the sound, eerily timed. "If you're hearing them at the door, don't answer. Call Henry Cross. His number is written in the back of the blue ledger on the desk. He'll know what to do." The pounding stopped. Silence again. I looked around the room and there it was, a blue ledger beneath a stack of old mail. I opened it, flipping through careful handwriting until I found it. Henry Cross, caretaker, divided by phone ending in 8127. I dialed with shaking hands. After 2 rings, a gravelly voice answered. Mrs. Hartwell? Yes, I breathed. This is Evelyn Hartwell. I'm at Maple Creek. Jonathan told me to call you. A pause, heavy and knowing. Then you're in more danger than you realize. His brothers are here. I figured they would be, Henry said grimly. Don't open the door. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And Mrs. Hartwell, yes? Don't trust anyone until I arrive. The line went dead. I closed the laptop and went to the window. The SUV was gone for now. The sun had dipped low, throwing long, twisted shadows across the fields. Behind me, the house creaked like it was breathing. Somewhere above, a floorboard groaned. I turned toward the staircase, pulse racing. Henry can't get here fast enough, I whispered. By the time Henry Cross arrived, night had fallen across Maple Creek like a thick, black quilt. The moon was a thin white scar over the fields, and the farmhouse, despite its beauty, felt like a living thing holding its breath. Headlights cut through the darkness. A battered pickup truck pulled into the gravel drive, and a tall man in his 60s stepped out, his shoulders broad and his gait deliberate. He carried himself like someone who'd seen too much and survived all of it. Mrs. Hartwell? He called, voice deep, steady. I opened the door cautiously. He removed his hat, eyes softening as he studied me. Henry Cross, ma'am. Jonathan told me this day would come. Hearing my husband's name in another man's voice nearly undid me. You worked for him? I did, and with him. Though truth be told, it felt more like I worked for something he was building, something bigger than either of us. He stepped into the entryway, glancing instinctively toward the windows before locking the door behind him. They were here, weren't they? I nodded. 3 men. They said they were Jonathan's brothers. Richard and Charles, he muttered, and that quiet one they drag along when they want sympathy, David. The unholy trinity. He set down his jacket, scanning the room with a mix of pride and sorrow. He did it, though. Jonathan actually did it. I helped him lay half these floors. He said he wanted you to walk on something solid, something that wouldn't splinter under your feet. The words caught me off guard. My throat tightened. He told you about me? Henry smiled faintly. He never stopped talking about you, said you were the one part of his life untouched by all the rot that came before. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. The farm, the videos, the secrets, suddenly all of it narrowed to that simple truth. He had done this for love. Henry's tone shifted, pragmatic again. Listen, ma'am, whatever those brothers told you, don't believe a word of it. They've been circling this place like vultures ever since the oil surveys came back. Your husband was smarter than they ever gave him credit for. He knew what was buried under these hills before they did. I frowned. He knew about the oil? Of course he did. He had me drive the geologists out here myself, under a different name. They found deposits deeper than anything in the neighboring lands. But Jonathan didn't want to sell. He said wealth was the Hale family's curse, and he was done feeding it. I turned toward the desk, my eyes landing on the closed laptop. He left me messages, videos, dozens of them. Henry nodded solemnly. Then you have what you need. I'm not sure I understand any of it yet. You will, he said quietly. But understand this. First, Jonathan's brothers aren't just greedy. They're dangerous. He told me to make sure you never face them alone. A faint hum filled the air. I turned. The laptop screen had flickered awake on its own. The file for day 2 was open. Jonathan, I whispered. Henry frowned. Did you? No, I breathed. It opened itself. The screen brightened, and Jonathan's face appeared again, this time filmed in the farmhouse itself, the same room where we stood now. Good morning, Evie, his voice said, calm, unhurried. If you're watching this, I'm guessing you've met Henry by now. Trust him. He's the only person who knows the full extent of what's hidden here. Henry froze beside me, his eyes fixed on the screen. Jonathan's tone softened. You're probably afraid. Don't be. Fear was the weapon my family used to control everything each other, money, even love. I built Maple Creek to break that cycle. He leaned closer to the camera, his voice almost a whisper. But Evie, there's one thing you need to know before you decide whether to stay or leave. The farm isn't just valuable because of oil. It's valuable because of what's buried beneath it. The screen cut to black. I blinked, confused. Is that it? Henry's expression had changed. He told you that? Yes. Why? What's buried here? He hesitated, as though measuring how much truth I could handle. Let's just say the Hales didn't earn their fortune cleanly. Some of what your husband dug up could destroy them completely. Documents, recordings, names, proof of everything they did to each other and to him. I felt a chill run through me. You mean blackmail? No, Henry said firmly. Justice. Jonathan didn't keep these secrets for money. He kept them to protect you. A sound cut through the silence, a sharp clang from the back porch. Henry's eyes snapped toward the noise. He motioned for me to stay behind him and moved to the side window, peering through the darkness. Headlights glowed faintly in the trees beyond the field. Another vehicle. Someone was watching the house from the ridge. Henry's jaw tightened. They didn't leave after all. I felt my pulse race. What do we do? He turned to me, eyes steady. We wait. We don't give them a reason to think we're scared. Tomorrow, we start digging. Literally. Digging? He nodded once. There's more to Maple Creek than you can see above ground. And your husband, God rest him, made sure only the two of us know where to look. Outside, the headlights disappeared into the trees. I exhaled shakily, clutching the brass key still hanging around my neck. Jonathan had built me a fortress, but somewhere inside its walls, he'd buried a war. And tonight, it had just begun to stir. Sleep never came that night. I lay in the guest room upstairs, listening to the creaks of the old farmhouse as wind pressed against its wooden bones. Each sound carried the weight of memory, a whisper from Jonathan's ghost, or perhaps something darker. By dawn, I'd given up trying. The horizon beyond Maple Creek glowed pale blue, and frost shimmered across the fields like powdered glass. From the window, I saw Henry, already outside, coat collar turned up, moving with deliberate purpose between the stables and the old barn. When I joined him, he was checking tire tracks in the gravel. They were here again after midnight, he said, crouching. Parked down by the tree line, watched the house for a while. Do you think it was them? He stood, Yafset. I'd bet my life on it. His certainty both comforted and terrified me. Henry brushed his hands off. If Jonathan's plan is still in motion, we have work to do. I blinked against the cold. What plan? He nodded toward the barn. Come on. I'll show you. The barn stood apart from the other buildings, older, less polished, its red paint faded to rust. Henry unlocked the heavy doors, and the smell of hay and oil greeted us. Dust floated in thin shafts of light spilling through the slats. Jonathan made this place look forgotten on purpose, Henry said, leading me to the back wall. Said if his brothers came snooping, they'd overlook it. He pulled aside a stack of feed sacks, revealing what looked like an old trap door built into the floor. The hinges were new, the wood wasn't. What is that? I asked quietly. Insurance, he said. The hinges groaned as he lifted it open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. A faint metallic glint caught the light below. My stomach turned. Jonathan built this? Every inch of it. I helped pour the concrete myself. He called it the war room, said someday you'd need it. I hesitated at the top step. A war against who, Henry? The same people who've been watching the house, he said grimly. Come on. We descended into the cool underground air. The scent of damp earth and oil mingled with something sterile, the faint hum of electricity. When Henry flipped a switch, fluorescent lights buzzed to life, illuminating a long concrete chamber lined with filing cabinets, maps, and monitors. This, Henry said softly, is where your husband kept the truth. I turned in a slow circle. On one wall hung a massive map of the property and its surrounding lands, covered in Jonathan's handwriting. Red lines marked boundaries. Black circles denoted oil deposits. But the deepest section, the western acres that his brothers had dismissed as worthless, was heavily circled in blue ink. Underneath, Jonathan had written one word: inheritance. What does it mean? I asked. Henry pulled open a drawer, revealing folders filled with financial statements, letters, and photographs. Jonathan found proof his brothers' forged documents years ago stole his share of their father's estate. They used that money to fund the company that later made them rich. My pulse quickened. He knew? Oh, he knew. And he didn't stop there. He dug deeper. He tracked the shell companies they used, the hidden accounts, all of it. I ran my fingers over the pages, each line written in Jonathan's steady hand. My husband had spent his final years not just rebuilding this place, but preparing for battle. Why didn't he tell me? Henry sighed. He said you deserved peace, that if anything ever happened to him, the truth would find you when you were ready to see it. Before I could reply, the distant growl of engines rolled through the air. Henry looked up sharply. We climbed the stairs, pushing open the barn doors, just in time to see a black SUV turning into the driveway, the same one from yesterday. But this time, it wasn't alone. A second car followed. They brought company, Henry muttered. The vehicle stopped near the house. The doors opened. Richard Hale stepped out first, polished and composed in a dark coat, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Charles carried a thick leather folder, and trailing behind them, my daughter, Clara. My chest constricted. No. She waved briefly when she saw me, her face bright, trusting, utterly unaware of the danger. I stepped forward, fury and fear colliding. What are you doing here? Richard's tone was calm, almost paternal. Good morning, Evelyn. I hope you don't mind Clara insisted we come. She's family after all. Clara smiled nervously. Mom, they called last night. They said Dad's estate might not be settled yet, and that they wanted to explain things in person. I thought, you thought they were helping you, I said, voice trembling. Sweetheart, these men aren't here to help. Richard's gaze flicked to Henry, sharp and calculating. And who's this? The hired hand? Henry didn't flinch. The man your brother trusted more than any of you. The faintest smile touched Richard's lips. So this is the famous Henry Cross, the ex-con who somehow became Jonathan's confidant. How poetic. I stepped between them. If you're here to intimidate me, you can leave now. Richard clasped his hands behind his back. On the contrary, we're here to offer peace, a settlement that benefits everyone. Charles opened the folder, pulling out several documents. We've drafted an equitable division of assets, 1/3 to you, 1/3 to your daughter, and the remainder shared among us. In exchange, you sign over control of the mineral rights. Mineral rights, I repeated. The oil. He smiled faintly. Let's not call it oil. Let's call it opportunity. Henry shifted beside me, his voice low but steady. You think she's stupid enough to sell? Richard ignored him, focusing on me. Evelyn, you're a teacher, not a businesswoman. This is complex territory. We have the means to manage it, the connections. All you need to do is let us help. Help? I whispered. Is that what you call stealing? His eyes hardened. You should be careful what accusations you make, sister-in-law. Grief clouds judgment. The insult sliced deep, not because of the words, but because of the smooth certainty behind them. Clara stepped closer, confusion in her voice. Mom, maybe we should at least look at what they're offering. Clara, I said sharply. Inside, now. She froze, caught between us. Richard smiled like a snake. You see? She's old enough to make her own choices. You can't protect her from everything. Henry's tone darkened. You might be surprised what she can protect. The tension crackled. For a moment, no one moved. Then Richard took a single step forward, lowering his voice. Jonathan's gone, Evelyn. He can't save you. But if you make the wrong decision here, if you fight us, you'll find out just how many ways a woman can lose what's hers. Henry's hand shifted slightly toward his jacket pocket. That's enough. Richard's smile didn't falter. Consider our offer. We'll be in touch. He turned, motioning for his brothers and Clara to follow. I watched, powerless, as my daughter hesitated only once before sliding into their car. The engines roared to life, carrying my last living piece of Jonathan away with them. Henry's voice broke the silence. He knew they'd go after her first. My chest ached. Then he knew exactly how to destroy me. Henry shook his head. No, Mrs. Hartwell. He knew how to prepare you. I looked down at the brass key in my hand, and for the first time, I wanted to use it not just to open doors, but to end something. The Hales had declared war, and I was done waiting for ghosts to fight it for me. The morning after they took my daughter, the air at Maple Creek was glass cold. The kind of cold that doesn't just settle on your skin but slips beneath it, finds your bones, and waits there. I hadn't slept. Every sound in the house, every sigh of old timber, every faint moan of wind through the eaves felt like Jonathan trying to speak through the silence. But he wasn't here to answer for what he'd done, or what he'd left undone. I was. By the time the first light broke over the ridgeline, I'd made coffee strong enough to strip paint and walked outside to the stables. The horses stirred restlessly as I entered. Their breath came out in clouds, soft and alive. Morning, ma'am. Henry's voice came from behind me. He carried a feed bucket in one hand, a thermos in the other. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "She's with them," I said flatly. He nodded. "I figured. I don't know what they've told her. They're clever. They know how to twist things until the truth feels like a lie." "They always did," he said quietly. "That's how they broke your husband in the first place." I turned toward him, the words hitting something raw. "Tell me everything, Henry. No more riddles, no more half-truths. What did they do to him?" Henry took a slow breath, setting down the bucket. "You deserve to know." He motioned for me to follow him into the main stall, the one that housed a magnificent black stallion. Midnight. His coat gleamed even in the dim morning light. "Beautiful, isn't he?" Henry said softly. "Your husband spent 6 months tracking this horse down. Said he reminded him of a painting you loved, the one of a dark horse against a storm." I swallowed hard. "I remember that painting. He said if he could find that horse, bring him here. Maybe he'd make peace with this land again." But peace wasn't something Jonathan ever found easy. He paused, rubbing the stallion's neck with a weathered hand. "When he came back to Canada 3 years ago, he didn't come just to rebuild a farm. He came to face ghosts. His father, his brothers, the things they stole." I leaned against the wooden post. "Stole?" "Everything that made him who he was. His inheritance, his reputation, his freedom. Their father's estate was meant to be divided equally, but the brothers forged documents after the old man died. Made it look like Jonathan had signed over his share. When he found out, he threatened to go to the authorities. They turned it around on him, made it look like he'd been complicit in the fraud. That's why he left, changed his name, built a new life with you in Minnesota." My stomach turned. "He told me his family just fell apart. He said it was better not to go back." Henry gave a low laugh, bitter, quiet. "He couldn't tell you the truth without dragging you into the dirt with him. So he buried it. And when the oil was discovered out here, those brothers of his started circling again. They thought they could corner him, reclaim the land they once stole. And instead," I murmured, "he reclaimed it first." Henry nodded. "With every dollar he had, quietly, carefully, piece by piece. But it wasn't about money anymore. It was about justice, about leaving you with something untouchable." I looked around the stable, the order, the care, the impossible cleanliness. Every nail, every hinge, every creature here carried Jonathan's invisible fingerprint. "He built this for me," I whispered, "and he died before he ever saw me stand in it." Henry's expression softened. "He saw it, Mrs. Hartwell. Every time he came out here. He talked about you like you were already here, said he could hear you laughing in the hallways that didn't even exist yet. Said this place would heal everything the world had taken." I felt my throat tighten until I could barely breathe. "He wasn't trying to heal me," I said finally. "He was trying to heal himself." Henry looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. Maybe both. By noon, I was back inside the farmhouse, the laptop open on the desk. Jonathan's videos had become a kind of scripture, painful, necessary, impossible to ignore. The next one loaded automatically. His face filled the screen again, this time thinner, paler. He must have recorded it not long before the end. "Hello, Evie." His voice was soft, but steady. "If you're watching this, I assume things are getting complicated." He smiled faintly. "They always do with my family." I could hear my own breath as I watched. "I want you to know something," he continued. "What I left you wasn't just a home. It's a weapon. Every document, every file, every record down in that room, it's designed to protect you and Clara. To give you leverage. They'll come after you, Evie. But they'll underestimate you. They always underestimate the quiet ones." He leaned forward, eyes burning with that familiar, maddening certainty. "You'll know when to use what I left. And when you do, don't hesitate." The video froze on his face, half shadow, half light. A sound behind me made me jump. Henry stood in the doorway, a folded newspaper in his hand. "They've gone public," he said grimly, holding it out. The headline hit me like a slap. "Local family dispute over oil property turns legal." Below, a photo me, blurred in the background, caught outside Maple Creek. And in the foreground, Richard Hale, perfectly posed, the picture of dignified concern. "The widow is confused," Henry read aloud, quoting the article. "We're simply trying to ensure our brother's legacy is handled responsibly." My hands clenched. "They're turning me into a villain." He nodded. "And they're building their case in the court of public opinion before it ever hits the real one." I closed the laptop and stared at the wall where Jonathan's paintings hung horses in motion, unbroken, untamed. They want a war? I said quietly. Then I'll give them one. Henry tilted his head. What's the plan? I turned to him, my voice steadier than I felt. Tomorrow, we go back down to that war room. I want to know every secret Jonathan uncovered, every name, every sin. And then, I looked out the window, where the fields shimmered in the weak afternoon light. Then we bring them into the light. Morning broke sharp and silver over Maple Creek. Mist curled low across the fields, wrapping the farmhouse in a kind of secret silence. I dressed without thinking jeans, a sweater, my late husband's coat, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. By the time I reached the barn, Henry was already waiting with a lantern in one hand and a crowbar in the other. You ready, Mrs. Hartwell? No, I said, but I'm going anyway. He nodded. That's close enough to ready. We descended the narrow staircase into the cold underground chamber. The hum of the generator was steady, constant, like the heartbeat of the house itself. Jonathan's world waited there, maps, ledgers, files meticulously labeled and arranged. Every drawer whispered a piece of a truth I hadn't wanted to know. Henry pulled open one of the cabinets. Inside were black binders marked Hale Industries, confidential. He laid them out on the table. Your husband was nothing if not thorough, he murmured. I opened the first binder. A photo slid out Jonathan at a ribbon-cutting ceremony years ago, his smile tense, his brothers flanking him on either side. Behind them stood a group of officials, all too polished, too comfortable. Who are these people? I asked. Henry pointed. That one's Senator Larkin. That one's Judge Keene. Both of them took Hale money in exchange for permits and approvals that never should have passed. Jonathan found the wire transfers. I turned the page. Beneath the photographs were scanned documents, emails, contracts, offshore account numbers, all tied to the same two names, R. Hale and C. Hale. My husband had spent years gathering evidence against his own blood. He meant for me to use this? I whispered. Henry nodded. He knew you'd be the only one who could. Why me? Because you still believe in truth. That stopped me. I wanted to deny it, to say I believed in nothing but survival, but something in his tone disarmed me. Henry straightened, rubbing the back of his neck. There's something else. He moved to the far corner of the room, where a locked metal box sat half buried beneath a tarp. He told me never to open this. Said it was meant for you alone. The brass key around my neck felt suddenly heavy. I knelt beside the box and slid the key into the lock. It turned with a quiet click. Inside were three things: a stack of old letters bound by a faded ribbon, a small black USB drive, and a folded piece of paper with Jonathan's handwriting across it, for the day they come for her. My breath caught. Henry's voice was gentle. Go ahead. I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a letter, it was a map. A map of the western acres of the property where the inked word inheritance had been circled in blue. But this one had something new, a red X, drawn just beyond the tree line. What's buried there? I asked. Henry's eyes darkened. Whatever, he didn't trust the paper trail to hold. I pocketed the USB drive, closed the box, and stood. Then that's where we're going. The western acres were quiet that afternoon, eerily so. The air smelled of pine and wet soil, and the trees whispered like a choir of ghosts. We found the spot marked on the map near the creek bed, beneath an old oak that looked as if it had stood there since the world began. Henry drove the shovel into the ground. You sure about this? Jonathan didn't build things by accident, I said. If he buried something, it matters. We dug in silence for nearly an hour, the rhythmic scrape of metal against soil breaking the stillness. Then, with one final strike, the blade hit something hard. Henry crouched, brushing away the dirt until the edge of a wooden crate appeared. Help me lift it. We heaved it free and pried the lid open. Inside lay several sealed envelopes, a stack of photographs, and a weatherproof case with a single label, Evidence, 2013. My heart thudded. I recognized the date, the year Jonathan had told me he was nearly arrested. The year he vanished for weeks, claiming he'd been in negotiations with his family. I opened the first envelope. Inside were grainy photographs, surveillance images of Richard, Charles, and several men in suits carrying briefcases into what looked like a bank vault. Henry squinted. That's the old Miller Trust building in downtown Boston. They used it to launder corporate funds through a shell charity. The next envelope held bank records, transfers from Hale Industries to offshore accounts under aliases. One name leapt out at me, printed in neat type, Clara Hartwell. The world tilted. My daughter's name. Why? Henry's expression hardened. They're using her as leverage. Paper ownership makes her complicit, even if she doesn't know it. That's how they trap you, by making your own child the weapon. I felt something inside me fracture. They've already turned her against me once, I said, voice low. They won't do it again. Henry closed the crate gently. We'll need to make copies of everything. If this ever goes missing, it's over. I looked up at the oak tree towering above us. He hid it here so the truth could take root. Henry gave a small smile. Sounds like him. We carried the crate back to the farmhouse as dusk fell. The porch light flickered, throwing long shadows across the yard. Before I could step inside, the phone rang, the old landline Jonathan had insisted on keeping. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A familiar voice came through, smooth, composed, poisonous. Evelyn, I assume you've found what you were looking for. Richard, I said quietly, you really should have taken our offer. It would have spared everyone a great deal of trouble. I glanced at Henry, who mouthed stay calm. What do you want? He chuckled. I want my family's name out of your mouth and my niece out of your reach. But I'm willing to compromise. Bring me what your husband left, all of it, and I'll make sure Clara comes home safely. My stomach turned to ice. If you've hurt her, please, he interrupted smoothly. She's fine, having dinner with her uncles, but that depends on your cooperation. Midnight tomorrow, the old river bridge. The line went dead. I lowered the receiver slowly. Henry watched me, face unreadable. They want a trade. I looked at the crate at our feet, the weight of proof, of power, of everything Jonathan had built. No, I said softly. They want surrender. Henry met my gaze. So what do we give them? I picked up the USB drive and turned it in my palm, the brass key catching the last light of the day. Exactly what they asked for, I said. Just not the way they expect. Because tomorrow night, under that bridge, the Hartwell name would no longer mean tragedy. It would mean reckoning. The next day crawled forward with a grim stillness that felt almost rehearsed, as if time itself was holding its breath. By dusk, a pale fog rolled off the river, draping the lowlands in a shroud of gray. I'd spent the entire afternoon preparing not for surrender, but for war. In the war room, the lights glowed cold and blue. Henry sat beside the laptop, assembling a small device from parts he'd taken from an old camera, a GPS tracker, and one of Jonathan's motion sensors. This will make sure we know where that drive ends up, he said, fitting the pieces together with quiet precision. I slipped the USB. Jonathan had left into a duplicate case, identical in weight, identical in shape, but the drive inside contained something entirely different. A single encrypted video Jonathan had labeled, "For the Hales." We hadn't opened it. We didn't need to. I knew my husband too well to think it was anything less than a confession or a curse. Henry looked at me. You're sure about this? I'm sure they won't see it coming. He nodded, fastening the tracker beneath the decoy case. Then we make them think they've won. By nightfall, I was alone on the road to the river bridge, headlights cutting through the mist like spears of light. The landscape around me had turned into a monochrome painting: black trees, silver water, white sky. The bridge loomed ahead, a relic of another century: rusted girders, planks creaking beneath the weight of each passing thought. A black SUV waited in the middle. Its headlights glared like the eyes of a predator. I parked 20 feet away and stepped out, the cold biting through my coat. My breath came out in clouds. Richard Hale emerged from the driver's side first, every movement calculated. His brother Charles followed, carrying an umbrella despite the drizzle, his expression blank. Clara was standing near the railing, arms crossed, eyes red from crying. "Mom?" she whispered when she saw me. I took a slow step forward. "Are you all right?" Richard smiled faintly. "She's fine, for now." I wanted to tear that calm from his face, but I forced myself to breathe. "You said we'd talk." "We will," he said, motioning for Charles to step back. "Do you have it?" I held up the black case. "This is what you came for." Richard's eyes glittered. "Good. Then let's make this painless. Hand it over, and we all walk away." "Where's Clara?" I asked. "She leaves first." He smiled like a man used to winning. "You're in no position to negotiate." But I saw the flicker in his jaw, the same crack I'd seen years ago when Jonathan told me his brother couldn't stand losing control. So I took a step closer. You think I'm afraid of you? You think I haven't been living with fear every day since Jonathan died? I buried a husband, Richard. I can bury a brother-in-law. For a heartbeat, his composure wavered. He nodded at Charles, who walked over to Clara and gripped her arm too tightly. Fine, we'll do it together. Same time, you hand me the case. I release the girl. I glanced toward the shadow at the far end of the bridge, a faint glimmer of metal. Henry's pickup truck, hidden just beyond the trees. He was watching, waiting. I stepped forward. On 3. 1. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Mom, don't do. Richard reached for the case. 3. I let it go. He snatched it from my hand, snapping the latch open instantly. Inside lay the black USB drive. A victorious smirk spread across his face. You see? Cooperation wasn't so hard, was it? He turned toward his brother. Let the girl go. But before Charles could move, the laptop screen on Richard's dashboard, one of their surveillance monitors, flickered to life on its own. Jonathan's face appeared. My breath stopped. Hello, Richard, my husband's recorded voice said, calm and cold. If you're seeing this, it means you've finally taken what isn't yours again. Richard froze. What the? You've spent your life building an empire of lies, Jonathan continued. So I've built something to outlive you, a truth that can't be buried. On the screen, Jonathan held up a document, the same deeds, the same proof we had found. Every transaction, every bribe, every theft. By the time this message finishes playing, a copy will already have been sent to the Boston Times, the district attorney, and every shareholder of Hale Industries. Richard's face drained of color. Jonathan, he hissed. You son of a… Jonathan smiled. Correction. Husband. Father. And the one thing, you'll never be a man who made peace with his own soul. The screen went black. Richard hurled the case onto the ground and lunged toward me. But Henry stepped out of the shadows before he could reach me, shotgun leveled, steady and calm. Back away, Hale. The sound of boots on metal echoed across the bridge. For a moment, it was chaos, shouting, movement, the hiss of the river below. Then Clara broke free from Charles and ran to me, arms wrapping around my waist. Mom, she sobbed. I didn't know, I swear. I didn't know what they were doing. I know, I whispered, holding her close. You're safe now. Richard's rage curdled into something uglier, a desperate, hollow laugh. You think you've won? You have no idea what comes next. Henry cocked the shotgun. Neither will you. Richard hesitated, eyes darting between us. Then he stepped backward, slow, deliberate, hands raised, the predator retreating, not defeated, but wounded. He climbed into the SUV, slammed the door, and drove off into the fog. We stood there until the sound of the engine faded completely. Only the river spoke now, whispering against the steel bones of the bridge. Henry lowered the gun and exhaled. He'll run. They always do when the truth catches up. Clara pulled back, trembling. Mom, what happens now? I looked out over the water, the mist curling like smoke. Now, I said softly, we let the truth do what it was born to do. Back at the farmhouse that night, the laptop chimed with new emails. One from the Boston Times, one from the Attorney General's office, and one unsigned, but unmistakable, that simply said, It's done, Jay. I sat there staring at it, tears finally breaking free. Henry closed the blinds. You did it, Mrs. Hartwell. I shook my head slowly. No, we did. Jonathan started the fight, but we finished it. The wind outside rose like a voice, not angry this time, but peaceful, almost proud. For the first time since Jonathan's death, I felt something close to stillness. The war was over, but the reckoning had only just begun. The next morning, the world didn't explode. It unfolded slowly, methodically, as if justice itself had been waiting for the sun to rise over Maple Creek. When I walked into the kitchen, Henry was already at the table with a pot of coffee and the morning paper. The headline sprawled across the front page in black ink so bold it looked alive. Hale Empire under federal investigation. Beneath it, a photograph, Richard being escorted into a courthouse, face pale, jaw tight, surrounded by reporters. I stared at it for a long time. It's really happening. Henry folded the paper. He's going to deny everything at first. He always does. But they've got enough evidence to bury him for good this time. What about Clara? She's safe, he said softly. And the courts are already clearing her name. The digital records Jonathan left did all the heavy lifting. The DA's office says your husband's data package is airtight timestamps, signatures, offshore transfers, the works. I sat down, suddenly aware of how heavy my body felt. He planned everything to the last breath. Henry poured me a cup of coffee. That's love, Mrs. Hartwell, the kind that builds a map long after the journey's over. By noon, reporters had started calling the house. I didn't answer. The phone rang, and rang, and rang, until the answering machine caught the messages. Mrs. Hartwell, do you have a statement about the Hale family assets? Evelyn, sources say your husband left a second trust. Can you confirm? Mrs. Hartwell, we understand your daughter has been cleared. How do you feel? I unplugged the line. Silence returned like an old friend. Clara came into the kitchen then, still in her robe, eyes red but calm. She sat across from me and traced the rim of her teacup with one finger. They released a statement, she said quietly. The Hale board voted to dissolve the company. I met her gaze. And your uncles? She swallowed. Richard's being charged with fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Uncle Charles is cooperating with the investigation. I nodded slowly. He'll try to trade loyalty for leniency. Clara's lips trembled. They said I'd never get out of this, Mom. They said I was just like them. I reached across the table and took her hand. You're not. She looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, I'm sorry for believing them. I squeezed her fingers. You were scared. And scared people do foolish things. What matters is that you came home. That afternoon, I drove out to the old bridge alone. The fog had lifted, revealing the river in full silver and relentless, carrying everything it touched downstream. The place looked smaller now, the ghosts quieter. I stood by the railing and let the wind press against my face, cold and clean. Jonathan's voice from his last recording still echoed in my head. They'll underestimate you. They always underestimate the quiet ones. He had been right. But the truth was, I wasn't quiet anymore. Not in my heart. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing before the town courthouse, reporters shouting my name, microphones flashing like lightning. Mrs. Hartwell, is it true you've inherited full ownership of Hale Industries' remaining assets? Mrs. Hartwell, are you pressing charges? I looked at the sea of faces and cameras, the same people who once ignored me, dismissed me, labeled me the confused widow. I'm not here for revenge, I said clearly. I'm here for restoration. The men who tried to destroy my family forgot something simple. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs time. There was a murmur in the crowd. Pens scratched. Cameras clicked. And as for my husband's legacy, I continued, Maple Creek will not be sold. It will be preserved as a foundation for rural education and environmental research. My daughter and I will ensure that what was once built on greed will now serve good. The questions kept coming, but I didn't answer. I had said what needed to be said. As I walked back to the car, Clara was waiting by the steps. She smiled, tired, hopeful, real. You sounded just like Dad, she said. I looked up at the courthouse behind us, sunlight glinting off the marble columns. No, I sounded like myself. That evening, back at Maple Creek, I walked into Jonathan's old study for the first time since the night of the recording. The air still carried his scent, cedar, paper, and the faint trace of ink. On his desk sat the old brass key, the same one that had unlocked everything. I placed it inside a small wooden box and closed the lid. Thank you, I whispered. Outside, Clara was sitting on the porch steps, watching the sunset spill gold across the hills. Mom, she called softly, you should see this. I joined her. The light hit the farmhouse windows just so, turning them into mirrors of flame. The horses grazed peacefully in the lower field. For the first time in months, Maple Creek looked like home again. What now? She asked. I smiled faintly. Now, we start living for the things worth keeping. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Do you think he'd be proud of us? I looked at the horizon, endless, quiet, forgiving. He already is. The wind shifted, carrying with it the smell of rain and new beginnings. I closed my eyes and listened to it, the hum of life, of renewal, of promise. Maple Creek had once been a battlefield. Now, it was a sanctuary. Jonathan's legacy wasn't the oil, or the land, or the money. It was this the moment of peace after the storm, the proof that justice, when born from love, could redeem even the deepest wounds. And as night settled in, I realized the truth at last. The reckoning wasn't something that happened to us. It was something we had become.